On Network Africa today, 50 people killed in severe flooding in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Somalia's 10th parliament is sworn in, with 300 lawmakers taking their seats. And diplomatic ties strengthen between Russia and Egypt as they prepare to resume flights between them. Let's begin Network Africa. Hello everyone, I am Amarachi Ubani. Let's begin in the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is dealing with what could turn out to be a humanitarian crisis following severe flooding that has claimed the lives of at least 50 people so far. Governor of the province where most of the casualties took place, Congo Central Province, Mr. Jacques Mbadu, says the sort of thing only happens every 10 years. And the last time it happened was in January last year, when dozens of people were killed in the incident. Reports say the floods were caused by torrential rains that caused the Kalamo River, which usually flows through the city of Boma, to burst its banks on Tuesday. Health Minister for the province, Therese Louise Mbambu, says damage caused to the province is very serious. Scientific models predict that climate change will bring increased rainfall to Central Africa over the course of this century. Central and western parts of the Congo Basin are expected to be the worst hit. The VOA's French to Africa chief and Congolese historian Scott Bob has been monitoring the story. He joins us now from Washington. Scott, it's great to have you on the program. We do seem to be having problems with Scott. I'm hoping my producers can get back to me as soon as possible. But let's bring in the expert now, Greg Odogu, who is an environmentalist who joins us from Abuja. Greg, I'm glad you could join us on the program. And Greg himself is also not available at the moment, but this has been a difficult year for countries in East and Southern Africa because of drought. The situation was made worse by the El Nino weather condition. Our next report looks at countries' coping mechanism and their road to recovery.
Parts of East and Southern Africa remained on the grip of a devastating drought in 2016 that left millions hungry and saw the cost of staple food soar. An El Nino weather pattern caused by warming of sea surface temperatures of the Pacific Ocean triggered drought conditions across southern Africa, leaving over 60 million people facing food shortages. In Somalia's semi-autonomous regions of Somaliland and Puntland, the drought made an already challenging humanitarian situation there worse, causing shortages of water and pasture, as well as causing death of livestock, a lifeline for pastoralists.
I
am 80 years old. In the 80 years of my life, this is the first time that I have seen a drought this bad. It has killed so many animals and caused so much hunger. Our lives are in danger.
In Zimbabwe, the phenomenon destroyed crops and decimated livestock. The drought also increased an economic crisis in the cash-strapped country that has largely been deserted by foreign donors since 1999. In Malawi, about 2.8 million people were at risk of hunger after floods and drought hit the staple maize crop, reversing gains made in reducing rates of malnutrition over the past 2 decades. Malawi previously gave a fertilizer grant to small-scale farmers, but the cash-strapped government, starved of donor funds, has now scaled down on the program.
I am glad I have received this relief food. I literally had nothing at home. And with the rains this late, I will harvest nothing.
In Beloha, Madagascar, residents struggled with the country's 3rd consecutive year of drought. Many were forced to dig out riverbeds in search of water. Farmers like Flamina found it difficult to feed their families and harvested wild fruits for food.
We gather red cactus fruits and remove their spines, but this causes diarrhea. All of our neighbors are also suffering like us. Usually we grow maize, pulses, and cassava. If only it was raining, we would have been happy. If only it was raining, we would be happy.
In Ethiopia, 10 million people were affected in the worst drought seen in the country in 50 years. Humanitarian agencies called for more donor support to help address a humanitarian resource gap.
I cannot even sell my cattle and use the money to buy food because they are emaciated and no one will buy them from me.
Scientists say that the Earth is likely to get relief in 2017 from the record scorching temperatures.
We can take you back to that story now in the DRC. Legal environmentalist Greg Odogwu joins us now from Abuja with more on this and what could possibly have happened. Greg, I'm glad you could join us on Network Africa. What's a scientific explanation of what has happened in the DRC?
What is happening in DRC is because, just like you said earlier, the scientific models have already speculated there is going to be increased rainfall in that region. Now, why is it so? It is because the Congo Basin is a very wet place with the biggest tropical rainforest, and the second most expansive tropical rainforest in the world after the Amazon, because it's about 3.7 million square kilometers. It's quite big. And if you remember, even Nigeria is trying to do a project whereby we reflect our Chad Basin from the Chad River, the Lake Chad. We are going to reflect it from that Congo Basin, just to show you that Congo Basin is very, very active wet region. Now, what is happening is that there is so much condensation happening and precipitation just because of the fact that the place where and has two rainfalls in a year. It has two rainy seasons. The rainfalls in the country, they are very intense. And what we are seeing now is because climate change is affecting it in this way, there is going to be more to come because the land easily gets saturated. And when there is saturation point, there is always flooding. And that is what we are seeing now.
Mm. So do you think that people could have prepared for this, for such a disaster, Greg, or is there usually some sort of warning for something like this?
Yeah, that is why there is what is called Global Framework for Climate Services, whereby the international body, the World Meteorological Organization, has decided that every country should have their own climate services platform, whereby climate information will be given ahead to people that are most vulnerable, and this will be coming from scientific quarters and the meteorological agencies and other stakeholders that will make sure that this information is passed to the people that need it for planning, for policy making across all levels of government. So what I'm saying is that the country may not be able to have instituted this framework for climate services already, and is affecting governance. You know, it's expensive to institute. In Nigeria, since 2013, where our own national framework for application of climate services was completed, it has not been finalized. The government has not put it to good. NIMET, Nigeria Meteorological Agency, for example, in Nigeria, has been doing its work to give warning ahead through its seasonal rainfall predictions and other platforms through which they warn people. And the thing is that after warning, the people that are supposed to be affected by this weather condition, do they get this warning? You find out that it ends up in the places, in some tables and in some reports and documents. So the government has to institute that climate service to make sure that this warning and these predictions, they go back down to people that you institute the policies that will make it affect the lives of citizens. That's what I think is happening. Nobody predicts, nobody knows the extent to which it comes to occur at the end of the day. But at least there is an inkling of the direction of the weather given out by meteorologists.
Greg, I'm looking at some of the pictures as you're talking there, some of the pictures from the DRC, and it looks like a dire situation there. But if this happened last year, and then scores of people died, being that this happens every 10 years, could recent climate change perhaps have affected the area if they're experiencing devastating floods this year, just like they experienced last year? Could that be as a result of climate change?
Yes, it's about climate change. If I get your question correctly, you are trying to say that climate change is the impact is growing exponentially. Well, what is happening is that we should expect more of this and get ready to adapt to them, and also get ready to mitigate, so that when we mitigate the emission of the effects of climate change through reducing the emission of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, then society will be better for it. But we have to know there is so much cost, and Africa is more at danger of losing in this impact of climate change, because the scientists have already said it, that Africa are most vulnerable. That we are the developing countries, we are the poor countries, and we are more vulnerable to the impact. In fact, the people that emitted more carbon into the atmosphere that caused this climate change, they are not suffering as much as we are suffering in Africa right now. And what we are seeing in Congo should be a wake-up call to everybody, the stakeholders that especially negotiate at the international level. When we talk about Conference of Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, now is the time to look at that. There is a particular platform we call loss and damages in the negotiation table. Now is the time to look at it. Now is the time for us to look at the climate fund that is made available for developing countries like us to use to mitigate climate change. Congo DRC is supposed to take more from this climate fund right now to adapt to the impact they are seeing, and also to protect them from the future that is around the corner.
Greg, I'm so glad you could join us to explain all of this. Our hearts, of course, goes out to those in the DRC, especially in that province which has been the worst hit by this floods. So we're hoping that the government and as much help and aid gets to them as quickly as possible. We have the VOA's French to Africa chief and Congolese historian Scott Bob on Skype now from Washington. Scott, I'm glad you could join us on the program. From what you're hearing on the ground, how bad is the casualty from the floods?
Well, most of the information so far is coming from the governor of the province, Governor Mbadu, who says at least 50 people have been killed. They buried 31 bodies yesterday, Wednesday, and they're expecting 20 more to be delivered. These are bodies that washed out across the river into neighboring Angola. So, and they're still digging, so they expect to recover additional bodies as they dig through the up to 2 meters of mud that washed through.
Give us an idea of the humanitarian situation in the province affected and how badly it could turn out in the next few days.
Well, as always, these have an immediate effect of disrupting commerce and life, and 500 homes at least have been destroyed and making about several thousand people homeless. So on the individual basis of those affected, it's of course devastating. In the city itself, they'll be digging out in some areas of 1 meter to 2 meters of mud that is left by the flooding. And then in other parts of the province that won't be affected, other than the fact that Boma lies on a main artery from the coast to the port of Matadi and then on into Kinshasa. So port activity there, it's a smaller port than Matadi, but it's nevertheless an important one. And it will affect the agriculture and the commerce in the region especially.
I'm hoping you can quickly squeeze this in. What's the general mood like in the DRC following what has just happened?
The communications have not been that good, so most of our information is coming from officials. So, but obviously people are devastated and trying to just recover their lives as quickly as possible.
Thanks a lot, Scott, for joining us on Network Africa. Well, still ahead on the program. Here in Nigeria, police berate suspects of the southern Kaduna crisis. We'll have more on this when we return.